What up, y'all? This is Patrick Hayes, and today what I want to do is I want to share with you a thought experiment or a metaphor. Now, this metaphor or thought experiment is probably going to be a series of quite a few videos. It's something I've kind of been working on for a while but haven't shared because of just kind of how verbose it is. It will probably take a few videos for me to get this whole thing off the ground and fully explain it to you. But it's really cool, and it's essentially a framework for the evolution of our consciousness in a somewhat simplified format that brings technological metaphors into it and describes not only the evolution of our consciousness, but also kind of the fields of experience or the matrices of reality in which our consciousness travels through. So it's something that I think is really cool and really useful as kind of like an orientation tool, and it's something I'm excited to go into. Okay, so where I want to start is on the 3 different levels of consciousness. Now, I know consciousness could probably be broken up into a million different levels, but I'm basically breaking consciousness development up and sectioning it off around 3 different levels. And I'm calling them the instinctual program, the intellectual program, and the post-intellectual program. I'm calling them programs because each one of these levels has a certain kind of software program running within it. And the software program being a set of code that influences consciousness to behave in a certain way. Now, the first one, the intellectual program, is a program that we all inherited. Now, whether you believe that humanity came from apes, whether you believe that they're an extraterrestrial hybrid, whether you believe that they just kind of appeared on the planet, whatever your belief system is, we can all agree that we have instincts, and instincts affect our behavior. Because instincts, in a sense, is like a software program, and that program is running, meaning when the consciousness is moving through the dimension and it sees a certain thing, an instinct will respond a certain way with a kind of momentum or current, and then we either move with that momentum or we choose to transcend that current and make our own decisions. Now, the intellectual program is actually very similar to that, except for it's a different level of development. It's a higher level of development, because the intellectual program, or the intellectual, is what we would call a paradigm more in psychological terms. The intellectual program is something that that gives us the power to transcend or to overrule our instincts. So due to the new faculties that are being used in the intellectual program, we have the capacity to be more powerful or to make a decision despite our instincts. Essentially, this intellectual paradigm is basically like a superpower compared to just the instinctual program or paradigm. Now, the intellectual paradigm I like to break up into 2 different categories, because when we look at humanity, humanity is primarily operating from within the lower intellectual paradigm and the upper intellectual paradigm. And there's a major bleed through moving towards the higher intellectual paradigm and then ultimately into the mystical. But the 2 different sections I want to break it into are instinctual intellectual and post-instinctual intellectual. So we have the instinctual intellectual, which is what a lot of humanity is operating under, and is basically just the using of the intellectual capacities to serve the instinctual drives, right? So this is people that are using their ability to reason, to rationalize, to slice up the reality, develop philosophies and ideas and paradigms in order to serve the desire for self-preservation, for procreation, and for power, right? And this is the source of a lot of our troubles. If we did not have the ability to use our intellect, we wouldn't have the ability to destroy the planet at such a severe and quick rate. But the fact that we do have that, but we haven't transcended to the post-intellectual phase, we are destroying the planet. Now, the post-intellectual phase is where an individual or a culture starts to move beyond their instinctual desires. It starts to create certain philosophies or ideals that become powerful enough to let somebody resonate with the ideal more strongly than the current of their instinct. So they can basically, in a sense, develop a willpower based off of resonance with an idea form. Now, this second stage of the intellectual paradigm is where consciousness is moving as a culture. You see more and more people that are becoming interested in expanding themselves and coming to greater philosophies and to give a greater service to the planet and move beyond just their initial instincts for survival, sex, and power, right? And this is a beautiful thing. But we're moving towards the mystical realm. And in the same way we can use the intellectual program to overcome, in a sense, the instinctual program, we can use the post-intellectual or the mystical program to overcome the intellectual program. Meaning, when we start having mystical experiences, levels of knowing, levels of beingness that transcend our intellectual understanding, that can influence our behavior in a way where there is no intellectual foundation to rationalize it. There is no instinctual desire to rationalize it. And it's something that's just beyond the intellectual realm altogether. And this is what I'm calling the post-intellectual realm. And this is how we kind of move into the post-intellectual realm. Now, the post-intellectual realm or the post-intellectual program is something that's very vast. That's why I'm just lumping it into this vague category called post-intellectual. But what it includes is an all-knowing state. It includes different psychic awarenesses. It includes what people may call presence. It includes different kinds of ESP sensing, where we can sense things from outside the time dimension, where our interpretations are not limited to the time that it takes to analyze something, but where there's sometimes gestalt knowings, where tons of information will come in all at once and it can inform us of a disposition that may take, say, 20, 30 years to come to a conclusion from when if we're just analyzing things or just operating within the intellectual program. So the post-intellectual program is filled with all these esoteric and mystical things that we've heard of and some of us have experienced that really transcend time and that are beyond what I'm calling the intellectual program. And this is our destiny. This is what we're moving towards. Now, as you see, when we move through these categories, we don't relinquish the lower categories, meaning we're in the intellectual program, but we still have our desires. And even at the higher ends of the intellectual program, we don't get rid of our desires, but we rather learn how to moderate them or how to work with them in the most useful way. And this is the same thing that happens as we move into the higher mystical realm. We don't relinquish intellectualism, but we actually use our intellectual capacities for a greater purpose, and we're guided from a higher principle. We're guided from a higher program, right? So these are the different software programs that are kind of interlaced and working together. So I just wanted to give you kind of like an overview of the 3 different levels of consciousness development so that we have a bit of an orientation for the rest of the series that I'm going to be rolling out. Now, in the next series, I get more deeply into the intellectual program and kind of how it's coded, and then how it interfaces with some of the different matrices that exist in our physical holographic reality. So I'm super excited to continue moving forward. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Hayes, and I will talk to you next time. One love.